Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich. And today we have a familiar face back with us. We have Burt Watson again. And as you heard in his first story, a lot of the progression into the boxing scene, he then makes a transition into the MMA scene. And so excited to highlight that. So, Burt, thanks for coming back on today.
Man, you're welcome, man. And it's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to talk to you, baby.
Yes, sir.
And I'm liking that jacket you got on there, son. Hey,
I had to dress to impress my friend Burt here.
You was trying to sneak it in the last time, with the little vest and everything, but it told a lot on you. But you look good, son. You look good.
I appreciate it. So, Burt, to kind of bring the ending to the boxing, and once again, all the different people that you had the opportunity to represent and work with, talk a little bit about that.
And it's, as we said earlier when we did this first interview, I started my boxing career with Joe Frazier, and I went on through Muhammad Ali and George Foreman and the Mike Tyson era and Roy Jones and Oscar De La Hoya. And I was also privileged to work with the first female fighters to get into boxing, and the privilege to working with the best female fighter, in my opinion, of all time. And that was kind of surreal for me.
Yeah.
Because in 1999, still working with Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali, someone introduced me to Muhammad Ali's daughter, Layla Ali. And ironically, this was in 1999 or so when she started. And at the same time, Joe Frazier's daughter was starting. It was so surreal that here in the midst of everything, in this legendary career of both guys, they have daughters, and it's the daughters that carry on the legacy, and eventually took on what became Ali Frazier 4.
Yeah.
Okay. And I did that fight up at the Turning Stone Casino. And it at that time, I had met Layla and her promoter, and I had conversations, which I was an independent contractor. Mm-hmm. So my conversations led me to her fights.
Yeah.
Because I was independently, by that time I had left Joe Frazier and I was independently doing my thing, but still didn't particularly leave him. He just said to me, things were getting a little slow and there was other opportunities for me, and I got calls from the networks and so forth. So I did it and wind up sitting one day in a press conference with Layla Ali and Jackie Frazier. And from a side angle, I saw Muhammad and Joe all over again. And it was so surreal for me. And, they had the fight happened. And Layla won the fight, but, that was in 2001 or 2 or so. Yeah. Both of them were 8 or 9 fights into their career and undefeated, and decided to do that. And I think Layla her record was 25 or 24-0, and I did 20 of her fights.
Wow.
Over the span, along the time. And she had become, Christy Martin was the name of female boxing at the time. And when Layla Ali came in and took an interest in it, the media went crazy with it.
Yeah.
And, I did a fight with her. She was on Mike Tyson's card, one in Louisville, one in Washington, D.C. There was De La Hoya and there was Roy. And Layla Ali just kind of made everything just kind of keep going.
Yeah.
And as I did her fights, again, it kept me active, kept me busy. I did a fight for a promoter at the time, and his name was Mike Akery.
Okay.
And he was doing Layla's fight, and he was doing a fight in Florida with Razor Ruddock. I don't know if you remember that name or know that name, but he did that fight. And on that card, on the undercard of the Razor Ruddock fight, there were two brothers from Russia, which were the Klitschko brothers. And I got to do their fight, and it just kind of went on from there. And I worked with the Klitschko brothers, Layla Ali, and everybody else. And I did that on, and in the year 2000. And you can quote me on this, but I think the record's there. But I did a fight in Las Vegas for a promoter by the name of Bernie Dillon. And Layla was supposed to be on it, and I don't know, but it didn't happen. But it was Kostya Tszyu and Zab Judah. Okay. And when I did that fight, we were in Vegas at the MGM Grand, and the promoter came to me and called me in at, in between the weigh-in. And he said to me, Burt, listen, I've got this guy who is about to start this organization, and he needs people to help him. He's looking for a coordinator. He's got a matchmaker. He's looking for an administrator, just different things the guy was looking for. I want you to meet him. Well, he said this to me in the middle of the weigh-in, which was not a good time, for me to have another meeting. But I said to him, listen, maybe tomorrow or so, if he's around and we got some time, we'll meet. This guy came around the next day around lunchtime, and we had an hour and a half. And we got in the car to go get some fast food or something. Yeah. And it was me, Bernie Dillon, and that guy, Dana White. Yes. Was that guy. Yeah. And we had a conversation, and I had no idea of the dynamics of MMA. Yeah. I knew about martial arts. I knew Kung Fu. I know Bruce Lee, and I knew Bruce Leroy. Okay. That was it for me. But, the basics are the same. It's the fluff is different. Right. Coordinating and organizing, if you know how to do it, the basics of doing it is the same. The fluff around it. You may organize a boxing event, an MMA event. I actually did, at one time, I did the Billboard Awards. Oh, wow, yeah. As a yes, the Latin Billboards Award, okay? And couldn't speak the language, but I did the job. So and I did that Latin Billboards, I think in 2007 or something like that. But that's to say the basics are the same, the fluff is different. So this is 2000, and I said to Dana, and this was in, I think, maybe September or so. Yeah. I said, listen, you pay me and respect me, I'm your man, plain and simple. No ifs, ands, or buts. I get paid and get respected. I'll do the job. He said, okay, I got something coming up, and I'll get back to you. That was in September. He got back to me in December. I said, I'm doing a fight around January or February in Atlantic City. And I had nothing else on the schedule, and it was UFC 30. Yeah. And that was my very first event. And they had, and the name, Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, right. BJ Penn making his pro debut, Phil Baroni, Mark Coleman was there, man, it was just unbelievable. Yeah. But at the time for me, it was Kevin Randleman. At the time for me, it was a job. And these were guys that I really didn't know, wasn't familiar, but I knew they were athletes and they were the ones performing. Yeah. So I took the job, and UFC 30 was my very first fight with the UFC in Atlantic City.
That now I want to hire that because it's easy to say UFC today because it's just grown to be this huge organization. But if you
Yes,
rewind to 2001 and UFC 30, those names today are very prominent across the sport because the
yes,
sport's grown so much. But at that
yes.
time, compared to boxing, it was like the redhead stepchild. It was not even the same league. But what did you see or what did you appreciate about what Dana was kind of preaching to you or his vision for it?
Well, I saw, first of all, I saw the way they treated the athletes, being Dana and the organization,
Yep.
and I saw the way the athletes treated the fans.
Yeah.
And in my world, that's a whole nother world,
Right.
because back in the day when I did a show with Mike Tyson, if I wasn't specifically in that group and they knew who I was, I couldn't get near him.
Yeah.
But the fact that I was in the same thing for De La Hoya or Roy or Evander Holyfield.
Yep.
If I was not the coordinator and was in that group, I couldn't touch them, couldn't get near them. But then I transitioned and I did UFC 30, with Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture and BJ Penn and those guys. And I had to go in a crowd to get them out of there.
Right.
Okay, because there was, and that to me, as trivial as that may sound,
No.
that to me, because I'd been in for a while and I kind of knew what the hell I was doing, what I was seeing.
Yeah.
I saw little legs.
Yeah.
I saw little legs, and the more it started, we went from UFC 30, 31 on up. The more the fans started coming and they knew where we were and they started knowing names. And at the time they had no idea. They knew who I was, but I had no name and no real identity. But when we were someplace and the fans came in and Chuck Liddell walked in the room or walked towards the office, the fans mauled him and nobody said a word. Nobody stopped that. Nobody didn't allow the fans to do that. And believe me, Phil, I'll never forget in my head seeing that and saying, you know what? This shit got legs.
Yeah.
And as it grew, it was more so the fans growing around it than it was the sport. Because we weren't bouncing around because a lot of the commission were not allowing the UFC to perform in certain states.
Got it.
So Dana had a hard time placing it. But wherever he placed it, them fans came out of the woodwork. Yeah. And they were there and they followed. And he let that go and allowed that to happen. Yep. The one thing that I would say about Dana White early on and meeting him was that he was the type of person that he gave you a job and didn't try to tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
He let you go. If you ran out of gas or ran into a wall, that was on you.
Yep.
He might decide to put gas in that tank, or he might not decide to put gas in that tank. Okay?
Yes.
But he didn't try to tell you how to do it. And I just brought the same skills, same skill set, and basically the same group of guys with me to the UFC. Because we did this very same thing. Fighters were signed. The matchmaker made the match. When the fighters showed up, we got a hold of them, took them to a workout room, set it up, weighed them in, made everything available to them during the course of the week. For the weigh-in, for the press conferences, the night of the fight, for the dressing rooms, all those things were the same. And by that time, I had maybe 15 guys that I used. Now, those 15 guys, for each show, I only used 4 or 5 at a time. So they were I was rotating guys. Yeah. But as I was rotating them, they were learning the system. And those guys became my guys, and that became my system.
Yes.
And, and I was still doing boxing.
Yeah.
I was doing boxing. I was involved in UFC, and I was training guys at the same time. And boxing was a sport, and probably still is. And speaking of a behind the scenes, where fights were made but didn't always happen.
Yep.
Fights were made, fights were canceled, or they were moved and pushed aside. And sometimes fights were made at the last minute. Whereas Dana White gave me 6 dates, those 6 dates happened.
Yeah.
But when he gave me 6 dates, was the first multiple date schedule that he gave me. I'm going to do the first 3, and then the second 3.
Yeah.
In between boxers, somebody who was doing fights would call me, and I'll Klitschko brothers, they would call me to do a fight. And, they were pretty good at the beginning, but then things started getting a little different, where fights were few and far in between.
Yeah.
So when I got a phone call to do a fight, I had Dana White's schedule on a napkin.
Yeah.
And not one of them fell off. So I would have to turn the boxing down. And that went on with me until about 2005 or 6 or so. And it got to a point where somebody said, man, every time we call you, you're busy.
Yeah.
No, it's not every time you call me I'm busy. It's that you call me when I got a fight.
Right.
Okay. And then you decide to put a fight on. So that kind of, it decided for me which direction I was going to go from that point on.
Yes.
And in my entire 15-year career, I think I've only had 1 fight canceled in UFC.
Wow.
And that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But that and the way they were, coordinating and treating the fighters told me definitely that this thing has legs and it's going to grow.
Yeah. Now,
and we all know how it did.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was going to say, and so it has exponentially grown, right? I mean, I think a lot of people would say that, MMA has actually overtaken boxing on a monthly basis. You get the big fights, you get the Bud Crawfords today, and I'd say those are going to be big things. But on a regular, you might even argue that MMA has exceeded what boxing sees.
Without a doubt. I witnessed it. I saw it happening.
Now, was there a certain era of fighters that you feel like they really increased it? Because, you had those different transitions. Like you said, you had the Chuck Liddells, which kind of gained some momentum. You have the Anderson Silva phase. You have the, Conor McGregor phase. Obviously there's others, but, you start seeing kind of the transition of folks.
Yes. But those transitions lasted a long time.
Yeah.
Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture and Tito Ortiz, they lasted a long time. And as those guys were, you had Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, Tito Ortiz, Kevin Randleman, BJ Penn. You had those guys at the top that were holding it down and then one tier down, here was coming George St. Pierre and the Diaz brothers and Sean Shirk and Anderson was a little later. Yeah. But you had a whole another group, Robbie Lawler.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss any names.
No,
but you had the groups, the longevity of the groups was a little more so than boxing. In boxing, you might have had 2 to 3 guys at the time carrying the load and making 85% of the money.
Yeah.
Whereas in MMA, you might have had 8.
Yep.
Making the same money.
Yeah.
But bringing in mega fans.
Right.
And loyal.
Yeah.
Loyal fans.
Well, and even as you say, the Tito era and whatnot, you start to think of even what MMA did, well, Dana did with the Ultimate Fighter, right? Making the TV show that, hey, you get to your point, the fans really are getting to know these athletes. It's not just, hey, they show up, they box, and they're off the stage. It's no, we're creating a TV show, and this is going to bring more notoriety and more traction within the sport.
The good thing, the thing about Dana White he had a vision that he wanted to see happen. He didn't know how, but he had it. But then his timing was impeccable.
Yeah.
The timing was unbelievable because number one, it was a sport that no one had ever, that was a popular sport because everyone, I said, could relate to Bruce Lee and what he did for martial arts, but no one really saw it unless they were behind the scenes in that.
Yeah.
Dana had a vision that he was going to bring that out, and he had a platform. Then he took that platform to television.
Yes.
And television jumped on it. Spike TV.
Yep.
Jumped on it. And as Spike TV jumped on it, then it really started getting, and they wanted something that was going to maintain the fans, the viewerships, and was going to have some meat and potatoes on it. And that's when he came up with, well, here's how we get these guys.
Yeah.
We get them together, we bring them in, we put them in a house, we work them out, we train them. And I guess somebody said, boop, there it is.
Yeah.
And they put that on television.
Yes.
And now I'm telling you how I saw it from my standpoint of the Ultimate Fighter and how it happened and how quickly it happened. But I saw it happening. And at the time it was happening so quickly. And for me, it was like, well, maybe this is how they train. Maybe this is how they work out. Maybe this is how they prepare for a show. But I've never seen this on television.
Yeah.
And television showed it. And that viewership went through the roof. And it maintained and it brought mixed martial arts to the forefront of combat sports. It threw another form of combat sports into the mix of the sporting genre that television could sink its teeth in and had fan support. And when you got television contract and you got content and you got fan support, you're going to find sponsors.
Yes.
And that's what they did.
Yeah.
And it was awesome, man, to see that development. And to see those guys develop. It was I saw, I'm with Bellator now, but I get to see a lot of the guys. And I saw Robbie Lawler, and I saw we did a show in Hawaii, and I saw Nate Diaz.
Yeah.
Looking like a grown man.
A little different than when you first saw
him. Yes. I'm on social media, and Cowboy Cerrone just retired. Yep. And I posted a picture on Instagram, the first picture I ever took with him.
Yeah.
And someone texted back and asked me, was that Donald Cerrone? Was that his brother? And no, that was him, because he had, I told you that the fans could touch anybody and was totally involved, and they knew me and knew what I did, but did not know my name or did not know who I was.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a funny story. Every show we had a weigh-in. And I opened the weigh-in, and I'm not a Joe Rogan or
You're the
or
Bruce
Dixie.
Buffer of weigh-ins. You're the Bruce
Well,
Buffer of weigh-ins.
It became that. But I did. And the guys, the television guys, I was there, and they said that you know what, we got to hold these guys here until we get things in order. We got to get out there and tell them, right? Give me the microphone.
Yeah, all right.
And I went up on that stage and I started telling them, listen, the show's coming and you gotta, but I gotta hear from you. I gotta hear from you good and loud. And I went on like that and then I started yelling, UFC fans, make some noise. Yeah, baby. Then I started feeling myself.
Yeah.
And it went on like that. And every time now that became a part of it.
Yeah.
When the weigh-in started, I was the one that went to open it. And I kept going up on stage. And one day, I was reading something online, and they had something on saying, who in the UFC has the best job? So somebody said, oh, Dana White has the best job. He's Dana White. He's the man. He's this, that, yada, yada, yada. And somebody said, no, it's not Dana. Lisa, there was a woman named Lisa that was running thing. She has the best job. Somebody said, no, Joe Rogan has the best job. Then somebody said, no, Joe Silva, he's the matchmaker. He has the best job in the UFC. And somebody said, the last thing, no, that black guy up on stage has the best job in the UFC. And I read that and I was like, oh, hell no. So I went to Joe Rogan and I said to him, I said, Joe, I'm tired of being that black guy up on the stage.
I need a name.
I didn't have to say it.
Yeah.
I'm tired of being that black guy up on the stage. So Joe Rogan went up on the stage and he introduced the ring card girls first, Dana White, and the babysitter to the stars.
Yes.
Gave me that name.
Yep.
And that stuff. From that point on, I was called babysitter to the stars.
Yeah.
And I opened every weigh-in. And I say that because the post on Instagram of me and Donald Cerrone, he had the shirt on that said babysitter to the stars.
Yeah.
And that was the first t-shirt I ever had in my life with my name and my silhouette on it, but he had the shirt on and it was, yes, young Donald Cerrone.
Yep.
He was eyes big, he was starry-eyed, but he was cowboy.
Yeah.
He had no hat on, but they recognized him but didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
He had that t-shirt on, babysitter to the stars. So go ahead.
No, a question that kind of comes to mind, and once again, there's so many like impacts that an individual has, but you get to see young fighters, right? And
Yes.
Hey, maybe they're 5 or 6 fights in, and they, all right, they're getting an opportunity in the big lights, the big stage. What was, in your opinion, getting to know them as you did, what was one or two of the differentiators of some of the young people that came in and were gone in a flash of a pan, and others that really ended up becoming, the Nate Diaz's, right? The Klitschko's in the boxing world?
Well, I always talk to the fighters. I always talk to guys, which I even still do now. I have conversations with them before the weigh-in.
Yeah.
And I always tell guys, because I learned real early, sometimes when the lights go on, some people's lights go out. It's okay for them to get dim, but you can never let them go out.
Yeah.
And you got to remember that. I said, you got to remember that in everything you do. Because if those lights go out for 1 second, somebody's going to flip the switch on you, baby.
Yep.
And I said that to everybody because it was my way of trying to tell them that those lights are going to be bright. They're only going to get brighter, and don't let yours get dim. And you'll last a little longer.
Yeah.
But you got to, you at that level, everybody can fight.
Yep.
So one mistake can cost you your career.
Yeah.
One mistake can cost you 2 fights.
Yep.
or 3 fights out of the way.
Yeah.
So you always got to remember that. You always got to know that. And you always got to know that they looking, baby. Yep. When I ain't looking, they looking. And you know who they is.
Yeah.
Because they give you fights. So, you fight from here and not here. Yep. Because somebody will give it back to you.
Yep. That's good.
I would say that to all fighters, everyone that I meet, your fight, your night, get it right.
Yeah.
And that's how I introduced myself to them. And I tried to give it to them at a point that was consistent. I said the same thing to BJ Penn that I said to Sean Shirt. Yeah. I said the same thing to Chuck Liddell that I did to Diego Sanchez. I did the same thing to Diego Sanchez that I said to Khabib. Yep. Same thing to Anderson Silva. Yeah. I say the same thing now to Johnny Evelyn. And all the guys and young ladies. Yep. That I work with now. Yes. But they cannot let them bright lights, because those lights are bright. Yeah. When you get to that level, baby, the lights are all on, all up. Yep. Flip, 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 and you can't turn out one of them. Yep. That's so good. So, yeah. So around 2015, a event happens where a fighter ends up not getting back to a hotel room when they think they're supposed to, and this leads to just a conversation which you didn't appreciate the way that it was handled. And so once again, it wasn't anything with Dana, it wasn't anything with a team or a fighter. It was just you know what, I think it's time for me to step away and pursue something else. And that's when the opportunity with Bellator would come around. So talk a little bit about, how you end up getting connected with Bellator. I would imagine easy transition, but it's important to know is how that happens. Well, it's a transition. Yeah. None of this is easy because if you think it's easy, you're not going to do it right. That's now I'm trying to give you lessons at the same time. I love it. Hey, I'm taking notes. But you got to treat it like I said. Like the lights are on. The lights are always on for me. Yep. Always. And I know that. And it's you gotta treat it like that. It was one of those things where we had a fight in California, and someone didn't make weight. And I always made it a point that when this person didn't make weight, he had an hour to try to make that weight. Yeah. And I was the person that had to sit on the scale, to wait for that person. Yep. So I did, and I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and he finally came back. It was Mark Munoz, because everybody knows that. And he came back and he finally made weight. Now, we were staying at a hotel that was 5 minutes away from the venue. Yeah. Which was walking distance. Yep. And after the weigh-in, after everybody weighed in, everybody was happy, everybody was eating and drinking water or just replenishing themselves, and I sat there and I was pissed. And I told him that I was. And he knew that I was, because they know how much I take this to heart. Yeah. And, he didn't, and he came back and he did. And I went on to the hotel, and I got to the hotel. And at the time, the UFC was hiring new executive jackasses. Okay. I'll say that. Okay. Because that's what happened. One of those new hires, and I don't know if I can say that on your show, executive jackass, called me and said, where's Mark Munoz? So the way he said it, right away, I had the phone like this. And when he said, where's Mark Munoz? I was like, What the hell did he just say?
Yeah.
Say that again. He said it again. And I said, I left his big ass back at the arena because he didn't make weight. But when he did make weight, I left.
Yeah.
And then the person said, well, how did he get back here? Oh, did you hear my tone in that voice?
Yeah.
That's the tone that I got.
Right.
After 14, 15 years.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, you know what? I made him walk back. That jackass said to me, why didn't you walk back instead of making him walk back? Well, that was it.
Oh.
I went in on him. Luckily, we were here and not here.
Right.
We were on the phone.
Yep.
And I, and he started and I said something and he said something. I said, just shut up and let me talk. I said, how dare you question my integrity? How dare you question my work ethics, my manhood, the love I have for this job and this sport? And he said, well, I brought here to do what I think is right. Now, I'll take it back a little further. I had something with that guy before because he said something to a fighter that I didn't agree with. A female fighter. He embarrassed her. And I made her do the exact opposite. You're the first person I've ever said this to, son.
Yeah.
First. So I had stood for him anyway.
Right.
Because he embarrassed that female fighter and made her do something she didn't want to. And at any given time, I can get that female fighter to come and say that the story is true.
Yeah.
So when he said that, I just told him, I went on, yada, yada, yada. And ended up, he said something and I gave him the 2 words. And then that's when I said to him, he can kiss my wrist.
Yeah.
And that was it. I didn't even go to the fight the next day.
Yep.
And he said, well, you know what? You can get out of here. Just like that.
Yep.
First of all, I was hurt.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this to you, Phil, which I've never said to anybody in my time away. That story about him and that young lady.
Yeah.
And the fact that stewed in my head.
Right.
And I was hurt. And when he said that, I said, okay, you just kiss mine, you know what? And everybody around you. And I hung up the phone. And next thing I did, I called my wife. And I told her, I said, I'm coming home. And she got quiet.
Yeah.
She said, well, when is the fight?
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I'll tell you about it when I get home.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
I left. But I was so mad and so hurt. But I let that go. And luckily, I was in my room.
Yeah.
Because it would have been a lot worse if I wasn't.
Right.
Because those guys, tell you a quick story. Those guys cared for me and cared about me. We were at a show once, and the bus was coming out of the parking, and this guy came out of the parking lot in front of the bus and stopped. And he started cursing the bus driver out. And I'm standing in the bus driver because we just started to pull off.
Yeah.
I got out of the car to say something to the guy. 2 guys in the car. They jumped out of the car and ran to me.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm like, O-S-H-I-T. And I had just gotten off the bus and I'm standing there. They ran towards me. And the next thing I know, I see their eyes get big.
Yeah.
The 2 guys that are coming at me. And I turned around, the bus was empty. Okay? The bus was empty. And it was like, you got a problem, Burt? Something wrong? Something wrong, Uncle Burt? Everybody was off the bus. And I could hear them in my ear scuffling, something going on, Burt. But I saw them guys, their eyes got big and they backed up.
Yep.
And I turned around, I saw everybody, and I turned around, looked at them, and I said, you know what? We'll wait till you guys get out of here, okay? They turned around and got in their bus, got in their little car and drove off. I turned around, I said, my babies, get on the bus. Then they went on and they got on the bus. But all of that came in, and so it did. But Scott Coker and Bellator, there was a point in maybe 2010 or so when the UFC was really humongous, getting there more so, and had transitioned from Spike TV to, I think it was USA maybe.
Yeah.
And then, my personal opinion now, it decided, you know what? We are the game in town.
Yeah.
And we are going to be the only game in town.
Mm-hmm.
So they went on, they bought Pride.
Yeah.
And they bought Pride and they did this.
Yeah.
Bought it and stuffed it under the table. I never worked with anybody from Pride. Then I hear they're buying this organization, WEC. They bought WEC. I met all the people from WEC. They brought the fighters. I think that's where Cerrone came from.
Okay.
Uriah Faber came from.
Oh yeah.
Justin and Danny and all those guys. They got WEC. They did this and they did this with the fighters.
Yeah.
With all the fighters in the UFC. And I'm watching this and I'm like, what the hey? But you know what? My job was to keep that shit in order.
Right. Yeah.
Then Strikeforce.
Yes.
I didn't know about Strikeforce. Then Strikeforce came along. But along with Strikeforce comes Scott Coker, Carrie Anna, and a couple of other people. And I think Mike Hogan was there, but UFC bought them and kept them in and kept the fighters. Yep. But then the name went away.
Yeah.
And I saw all of that happening. And that's when I met Scott. And Scott and I started exchanging conversation, and I was exchanging conversations with Carrie Anna and a relationship.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how it happened or what happened, but the next thing I know, they were gone. But all the fighters were still there. But Scott was also still doing his thing, because they have another guy there. His name is Reed Harris, who at the time owned the WEC. So when they brought the WEC, they brought him. He's still there.
Got it.
He's still there. But Scott decided he was going to do his own thing, and he did. He did, and he kept it, and he kept Carrie, who is still there. And the next thing I know, there's Bellator.
There it is.
And I honestly, after leaving the UFC, I kind of became more of an independent contractor. But I took a little less work, because for the first 5 or 6 months, I did nothing. Yeah. I was digesting what had just happened to me.
Right.
But then some boxing came along, and somebody called me, and this person called, and then I started doing a little boxing, and started doing a little celebrity boxing, and then I started doing bare knuckle stuff, because people knew. Yeah. And they hired me, and I was doing that sparingly. And one day, I would always call Scott Coker. Yeah. And I called him one day, and I just, hey, what's up? What you doing? Oh, nothing, just getting ready for the next show. And I said, when is the next show? And he said, well, we got about three months or so. And we went on talking. And before, at the end of the conference, he said, Burt, what are you doing in the next 3 months? I said, and he said, you know what? We need to talk. And that's when I had the conversation with him. Yeah. He wanted that energy. He wanted that, whatever he saw or whatever I bring, he wanted that. Yep. and he brought me on. And I'll tell you something, Phil. I'm asked a few times about retirement and when am I going to retire? You hear people say, I love my job, I love what I do, but I do.
Yeah.
And it's so easy because it's so much of what I created over the years. I see things that, I'll say this and I'm just gonna throw this out. I was at a fight and the screen was on the fighters and they were hugging up with each other and they did this. That's all you saw. At the time they had white tape around and all you saw was this with white tape. And I came out from backstage and I looked at the big screen and I saw it. And I said, you know what? I don't know who's who. I see white tape. So I went to Dana and I said to him, I've got this red tape from Uline and blue tape that I'm going to put on the fighters. And he said, as long as you don't F it up, go ahead and do it. Now, Pride was using pink with something or something, but nobody was using red and blue.
Yeah.
And I put red and blue on the fighters. And I had, first person that came to me was Herb Dean.
Yeah.
And Herb Dean said, man, he said, that was amazing. And I'm asking what was amazing. And he said, the fact that I didn't have to look for who was who.
Right.
He said, I could see him out of the corner of my eyes.
Yep.
So that red and blue tape, I'll leave it at that. But
yes.
That's how that happened. And the television said the same thing.
Yep.
Man, he said that makes a world of difference. Let's keep using that. And I was like, you late. I already did. That's why you see it. Okay.
That's right.
So, but I'm having a good time, man.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying it. When I don't enjoy being at an event, then it's time to go. I don't enjoy getting on a plane. I'm afraid of heights. So I gotta have a certain seat by the window so I can shut the shades so I can close myself in and not know where I am.
Right.
I'm getting a little attention on that now because that didn't happen to me until I was 50. So I was in the Marine Corps.
Right.
Hey, I went overseas. I went overseas on a ship in a plane, the whole nine. I was never afraid of heights until I got to be 50. Yeah. So I don't enjoy, but when I get on site and it starts, lights go on. Burt Watson's lights go on.
Yep.
They get a little dim sometimes, but they never go out.
Never go out.
Yes, sir.
I love it. Well, Burt, I want to say thanks so much for highlighting all the pivotal moments that led you to where you're at today. And I'm just so excited to continue to watch your journey and the great things you're doing with Bellator now and the great things you'll continue to do. So you just got to promise me that, in the next year or two, as you just continue to grow and have great stories, you'll come back on and we'll get to do this again.
100%. I'll tell you something.
Yeah.
If and when I do decide, if you don't change your email address, you'll get the first call.
I won't change it. So I'm holding you to that.
If you don't change, and I've said that before about myself, I told a fighter a long time ago, and I have never changed it. When we finally got cell phones, I never. But if you don't change that email address, when I decide to, because I appreciate you and I appreciate you having me, baby.
You betcha, brother. Well, hey, thanks so much for being on, Burt.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. And I like that jacket, baby.